Thank you for having me. This was a lot of work putting this together. I thought it would be simple, but it wasn't. I've been doing this for over 3 decades of photographing LA's transportation, and I have quite a bit of material, and to narrow it down into about 45 minutes is not easy. So I'm going to start my presentation now and save a lot of my thank yous to the very end. And if there's some questions we cannot answer tonight, we will try to maybe email you with the answers or somehow get them answered to you.
It loads in a jiffy and you're ready to shoot.
Fading for years, this relic of a bygone era is forging an unlikely comeback. Driven largely by millennials and Gen Z on platforms like TikTok and Instagram, all of a sudden old cameras are back with a rallying cry and a hashtag. Film is not dead.
But there's only one true way to do this story justice. We are going to shoot the entire thing on film.
Here at NBC News, it's been more than 44 years since we measured our footage in actual feet.
This is NBC Nightly News.
But now, in our hyper-connected world, many like Jason Cumberfeld, who runs the YouTube channel Grainy Days, are longing for an analog past.
It's probably one of the best moments you can have as a human being.
We headed out to shoot a few rolls on the streets of LA.
You see the image right there before you, beautiful lighting, beautiful angle. The rest is just kind of up to Kodak Gold.
When you hear that click, what does that click sound like to you?
It sounds like old mechanical perfection.
At Total Cameras in Long Beach, owner Eric Vichwar says film sales have recently tripled, with demand for vintage cameras skyrocketing during the pandemic.
How fast are you selling these?
You know, these things are not staying on the shelf. The price right now is at $299, but I would say 3 years ago we were selling them at $160.
For some, it's the element of surprise.
I forget about the roll and then I go get it developed, and then I'm like, oh wait, that was fun. I totally forgot that even happened.
For others, it's a chance to slow down.
It is always magical. It never stops being exciting.
At the School of Light, Andrew Hall teaches the art of the darkroom to students of all generations.
I think what's drawing people back to film is they're finding that they really get a lot of satisfaction in taking that journey.
Byron Lewis is just 6 years old, but can already describe it perfectly.
Looks like magic.
It looks like magic?
And today, so many rediscovering that magic of stopping time with a little mechanical box.
So that was from Gotti Schwartz of NBC News, and that aired, I think, about 2 months ago. And I guess that's what a black and white photographer does, is he paints with light. And this photograph here was taken in the early 1970s. I went to El Camino Real High School in Woodland Hills, and my photography teacher, Mr. Carter, took us, a few of the classmates, to go visit Ansel Adams in Carmel. He was very generous to give us a tour of his home and his dark room. And not only was Ansel a talented artist, but he was able to teach his craft of fine art, black and white photography, to students and professional photographers. And he was an environmentalist and a leader in respecting and preserving the environment. I continue my photography, and the 3 photographers here are from the Owens Valley Photography Group. And I think it was in 1989, I enrolled in their 4 or 5 day class, and we were based out of Bishop, California. The instructors above are Ray McSavney, John Sexton, and Bruce Barnbaum, and they are all large format photographers. This photograph was taken on one of Ray's workshops that he gave in the Southwest, and that photograph I took was Ray against Factory Butte in Utah. I did go camping with Ray in the Southwest. He opened my eyes to the Southwest. And since he lived in downtown Los Angeles, we became very close friends. We would photograph the bridges in downtown Los Angeles. And when Ray passed away the week after I retired from ABC Disney in July of 2014. I became the caretaker of his archives, and with the generous donations from Ray's friends, we were able to rent a climate-controlled storage unit. And with the help of Janet Shipper and her sister Joan, we were able to place Ray's artwork at the Huntington Library, Portland Art Museum, Center for Creative Photography, the Central Library in Los Angeles, and the Marriott Library associated with the University of Utah. They took all his Southwest photography negatives, the Southwest negatives. Another influence was another photographer that I took a workshop with, and this is Oliver Gagliani. He taught black and white film and a printing workshop in Virginia City, Nevada. This photo was taken at his home in South San Francisco. And what I learned from these workshops was they taught you to do a project close to your home and often go back in the different seasons and see how the light changes. And I think this was in Bruce Barnbaum's book. And I think he said he may have got this saying from my photography teacher at El Camino, Mr. Carter, that the 3 human ingredients to produce success in any field of endeavors is you need enthusiasm, talent, and hard work. And a person can be successful with only 2 of those attributes as long as one of the 2 is enthusiasm. I should also say that I did take photography classes in summer school at Reseda High School, and that instructor was Mr. King, and he also influenced my photography. Well, my first photography project was photographing at the Pasadena Rose Bowl flea market. This photo is of Robert Warner with a beaded skull. Robert would make deerskin vests and sell them to many famous people. He now owns a leather shop in the town of Joshua Tree. This is at the swap meet, and it's my Thelma and Louise photograph. John Woods with Top Hat. This is at the Pasadena Rose Bowl flea market. I was invited by John to attend his art opening at LA City Hall, where he made an art installation of objects he found in and around MacArthur Park Lake. As quoted in an LA Times article about his exhibit, this art installation may be the most unusual time capsule Los Angeles has ever seen. And I will provide this link to the website later that you can view. Here's a father and son selling Levi's out of the van. And I thought that one Levi's was quite unusual, and I made a portrait of them. When I was showing my Rose Bowl photograph to galleries and museums, I visited with Jay Bioli, who was the director of the gallery programs at Pasadena Armory Center for the Arts in Pasadena. And it was Jay who contacted Pasadena Magazine to have my photographs included in their Pasadena Magazine winter of 1995. This was the first time I've ever had my work published. And the title of this article was Tales of the Bizarre, written by Van Martin Rowe. And I'll include a PDF of this publication in the links page of the Historical Society. Well, my next photography project included Harley Davidson riders. I photographed the bridges in downtown Los Angeles and also in the Southwest. And there's a few images I wanted to share with you from this series. This is the goth girl in an event called Reno Street Vibrations. I met Willie and Nancy Davidson. They would come to the Love Ride that was held in Glendale, but this picture was taken where the motorcycle riders rode to Castaic. And this was against their truck that they were more than happy to have their picture taken. And they were very down to earth. I did go with them to Harley's 100th anniversary in Milwaukee, and I traveled with them from Las Vegas all the way back to Milwaukee. Here's Jay Leno, and he was the Grand Marshal of the Love Ride for many years. And this photograph was taken in 2005. I titled this photograph, Two American Legends, Elvis Presley and Harley Davidson Motorcycles. This was taken not far from my home at the Rock Store, where on Sunday, a lot of motorcycle enthusiasts hang out. my last picture just from this little series here is, I think when I was with Ray and we were photographing an old building that's now SciArc. And these skateboards and the bicycle rider were all a group of young boys. And I asked them if I could take a photograph of them. And they posed themselves. And I just love this photograph. Well, I worked at ABC Studios in Hollywood, and I would drive by on Hollywood Boulevard every day. And the first thing I saw was a car wash going out of business. And I thought it was going out of business, but the land was taken over by Metro. And this was right in front of the Barnsdale Art Gallery on Hollywood Boulevard. So I saw the construction fences going up, and I saw a sign that this is a federal funded project. And I wrote a letter to the MTA Arts, and I asked them, how do I get permission to photograph the subway construction? And they came back a year later and said, Ken, you can come and photograph for a day. So that day turned into an over 3-decade project. I wanted to show you a little map here of what the red line looked like. This was from the map that is definitely changed now, but these were the stations that I photographed at: Vermont Beverly, Vermont Santa Monica, Vermont Sunset, and then all the way where it goes from Hollywood and Western all the way to North Hollywood. That was in the early 90s. I'm going to show you this little video about the tunnel boring machine. It's about 2 minutes long.
Tunnel boring machines, or TBMs, are giant machines used to build tunnels. The TBM is an amazing piece of machinery. It can tunnel under a town or city without disturbing anyone above ground. And in rural areas, this tunneling helps to reduce the impact on the countryside. On the HS2 project, the largest TBMs weigh up to 2,000 tons and measure over 170 meters, the length of 16 buses. Each TBM is made up of thousands of parts, including a rotating cutter head, a screw conveyor, conveyor belts or extraction pipes, and a tunnel segment erector. These help the TBM carry out its two main functions of digging the tunnel and building the tunnel. To dig the tunnels, giant cutter heads at the front of the TBM rotate, cutting away at the earth. When digging, the earth is carried up the screw conveyor and out of the TBM within a slurry pipe or on a conveyor belt. On average, they can dig up to 15 meters a day. As well as digging the tunnel, the TBMs also build the tunnel walls as it moves along. Tunnel segments enter from the back of the machine, get transported to the front and placed on the tunnel segment erector. Each segment is then connected together to form a ring. Once complete, the TBM pushes off to start digging again. The machine runs 24 hours a day, with teams working in shifts controlling the TBMs from the control center. The TBMs used on the HS2 project will dig over 80 miles of tunnels, forming part of the HS2 network that will help connect the country, create thousands of jobs, and rebalance the UK economy.
So that's a little introduction about tunneling underground. And when I first started photographing at the Barnsdale not at the Barnsdale location, they were tunneling two tunnels south and 2 tunnels to the west. And this was after the graveyard shift had just finished work. And I was setting my tripod up and I was taking my time. And here these guys just put in a 10-hour shift and really wanted to go home, jump in the showers first maybe, and gave me this look like, when are you going to take this picture? And I consider it one of my classic photographs, and I'm very proud of this image. And it was taken in 1994. One of the safety reps said, Ken, let's go down to 6th in Vermont. They're having a tunnel hole through. So I said, sure, I'll go with you. That was a person called Metro Man Fred. So I went with Fred in his vehicle, And I was very fortunate to be there at the right time to make these photographs. And these, it's Tony Anderson, and the other fellow has the nickname of Hound, and they're inspecting the breasting plates and teeth of the miner of the TBM after it broke through to the station at 6th and Vermont Avenue. And this construction site, this tunneling started at the Barnsdale on Hollywood Boulevard. This was the group photo that we took of the two Metro supervisors and the tunneling crew. Here, I sometimes do carry color film with me, and I thought I'd show this color snapshot that I took with my camera of the workers. This was at the construction between the Hollywood Hills. It was on Franklin Street, and this was Thelma and Louise were the names given to the two mammoth TBMs that carved through 2.5 miles of rock between the Santa Monica Mountains to create the Red Line. This is the section that leaves the Highland Station and travels north to Universal City Station. Each machine was the length of a football field with a cutting diameter of 20 feet. The object in the foreground is one of the 4 outer sections of the cutter head. And I did not pose this. I was just hoping that the miner would not move, because I think it was about a 5 or 10 second exposure. And I was so happy that he didn't move in those times I was taking the pictures. This was considered to be like the track level room, and it was between Highland and Universal City that they were making this, and a miner is chipping away at the granite rock below Santa Monica Mountains. Here is a rock that is in the office of the construction safety Pat Chisholm, and they call this a hot rock just because, or a shot rock, just because they would place the dynamite explosives in that hole there, and then usually you never see a picture like this after they placed the dynamite and it exploded. Here's Pat visiting the station at 2nd and Broadway. This photo was not from the Red Line. Here, construction workers are shoveling and picking up the dirt along the rail tracks below Hollywood Boulevard. This is below Hollywood Boulevard with rebar inside the arch form. They do the tunneling quite different now with modern technology, but in the 90s, they would bore the tunnel hole and then have to come back, put the HDPE to keep out the water and the gases underground, and then put the rebar, come back with a machine, and I don't know if it was 50 or 60 feet long, and then put in another, I don't know if it's 6, 8 inches, maybe even a foot of concrete to make the concrete wall. And here is the plastic crew as they're putting the HDPE around the tunnel. And you can really get this dramatic effect with the lighting of the tunnel. And this is inside that concrete arch form. And I did a group photo of the workers. And the reason you'll see a lot of group photos in my presentation tonight is that I would always try to give the workers, after I was done with taking their pictures, I would tell them, well, in a couple of weeks when I come back again, I will bring you a photograph. So it's so easier in my darkroom to make a print of the group photo rather than of a single portrait. There wasn't that many women working on the Red Line, and at one of my exhibits that I had, a girl came up to me and she said, "How come I don't see more women on your at the presentation?" And I said, "Well," I said, "there isn't that many." So I wanted to show you Jennifer, who was an electrician, and this was at the Universal City Station bottom landing. And I know there was a geologist, and now presently there is a lot more women involved with construction. This was right below at Universal City at the station there. where the Hollywood sign was 2.5 miles. And this was right at the tunnel entrance to head to Highland Station. I love the dramatic lighting with the light filtering in, and the guys, I guess, were getting ready to concrete, and for some reason they were cleaning out the rail car because the concrete had dried too quick. So I guess this was a process now that they had to chip it out and come back and re-pour again. This is Tony Traylor. He is related to the Traylor Brothers Construction Company. And in 2018, he retired after 40 years with Traylor Brothers Underground Division. This was from the Traylor Brothers newsletter that described that Tony had worked on over 20 underground construction projects in his career, including the Metro and the gold lines in Los Angeles. And you can see on the bottom there all the different places he worked at in his career. And I think now, even though he did say he's retired, he's still doing some side work working. But it was quite an honor. And you can see, being a miner, sometimes it's not as easy life of staying in one location where you go from one job to the next. These were miners chipping out for a cross path, and you can see their type of machines. And that one on the right, I don't see that anymore, the present day mining. So I'm not sure exactly what that was, but maybe we can find out. So, and this was Eve Reeves, a yard foreman with Universal City. And as a young girl, Eve was photographed by Imogene Cunningham, and I still stay in contact with Eve. And just a few days ago, I heard from Chucky. I haven't heard from her since the red line was finished. And she told me that in this photo that when I took a miner had asked her to hold his cigarette, and she told me that she doesn't even smoke. After the red line construction was over, she worked across the street from the construction site, worked a few years at Universal Studios as The Adventures of Conan, a sword and sorcery spectacular show. In 1997, I had written to Joseph Karsh, and I wanted to know if he had any talks or lectures in Los Angeles. And I did include one of the MTA reviews, which talked about the progress of their construction going on to their employees. So I hope you can read this letter. It was really a very nice reply that I did receive from him. And Joseph Karsh did that famous portrait of Winston Churchill, and he has that very stern look. And the reason he got that look of Winston Churchill was he grabbed his cigar out of his mouth and then snapped the photograph. So I thought that was very clever. I also wanted to thank Linda Bybee, who was of inspiration to my artwork when I started working on the red line. And she helped me get exhibits at the Barnsdale Art Gallery, the Japanese American Museum, and LA City College. So my next project that I moved on to, I guess I did go to the gold line extension. I went to the gold line extension. I didn't show any photos from that, but the next project I started in 2016 was the regional connector. And here's a map of the 3 stations. The regional connector is going to open soon, hope soon. And it's first in Central, second in Broadway, and then second in Hope Street. It's supposed to open in the first quarter of this year. Here's a little facts and figures, and I'll have links to these, but it shows a little bit about the tunnel boring machine, the height, the speed, the mass, the width, the weight. This picture is of Eric Garcetti, and Windsor. And this is from, and I just received this email from Windsor's dad a few days ago. And Windsor, she's currently studying in London for the semester, and is going to school in Berkeley. And as she says, he told me, I have very fond memory of Windsor's involvement with the TBM, the Regional Connector Project. She used the TBM naming contest essay presentation on her college apps, and I'm sure it helped in getting her into Berkeley. So this is a tunnel boring machine from the street level at Central Station looking down, and it was taken in 2016. The miners set a one-day record of mining 190 feet in one day in 2017. This photo was taken a few days after the TBM had broke through the future station at Hope Street. I always try to capture the monumental moment of a tunneling project with the workers, including the two miners crawling out of the center of the TBM cutter head. You can look at the center and see there. They do have to, when they are underground, have to replace those cutter heads when they do get worn or hit some sort of rocks and things. So this was at the Second and Hope, about a few days after the hole through. Now we're inside the TBM, and it takes 6 precast concrete tunnel lining segments to assemble a 5-foot wide tunnel ring with an 18 feet 10 inches inside the diameter. The operator works the remote control for the vacuum hoist cable crane to transfer the segments into place. A view of the TBM tail with precast concrete tunneling lining segments that have a double gasket joints to ensure a water and gas tight seal. And this was taken in 2017. Here's what it looks like at a TBM hole through, and this was below at Flower Street. From Flower Street to 7th and Metro, they couldn't put the machines tunneling through there because there was too much utilities that they would bust into, so they had to tunnel that by hand. This is below Flower Street. Bert was the tunneling supervisor there, and he's with Christoph looking at a TBM during the hole through. Christoph made a book for the workers, I think in 2018 or so, and he did include many of my photographs to give to the workers at the very, as a holiday gift to the miners. So when they did reach Flower Street, they only had one tunnel boring machine, and then they had to extract it out, move it in the middle of the night back to First and Central, and retunnel the second hole. Here they are raising it up. This is right, raising the TBM section at Flower Street, right in front of the Westin Bonaventure Hotel. This was taken in 2021, and I just love the hard hat of this plaster. It's just, you can see he has plaster all over his hard hat, and he's with the local 200, and this was at the First and Central Station. This is the tunnel entrance below Flower Street that on the previous photos were the hole through photos. When the tunnels are completed, then they have to lay the bottom walkway for the rails, or not a walkway. They have to prepare for the rails, and then they also put a walkway in all through the tunnel. So this was at the station platform at Broadway, and it's looking south, and this was in May of 2020. This work was going on during the pandemic, and this is a carpenter topside at Hope Street, January of 2021. This is the Broadway station. All the stations do have exhaust fans, and it's just incredible. And you wonder why you do see the disruption of some of the lanes closed. Well, to get this equipment underground, they do need openings to bring these huge exhaust fans and other equipment to the station. This here is called the cavern, and it's at the Broadway station, and it's where the trains can cross, and it was quite a process to watch them. I have an incredible amount of photos to show the progress of how that was. And this was taken in February of 2021. But before that, there was a lot of dirt that they had to excavate underground to make this crossover. They do put trucks at the very end of when the project is almost complete. And this is installing rail electric power at the Broadway station. And this was May of 2021. This is a supervisor for the tunneling project, Becky Reeve. And I interviewed her right when she was leaving the project of December 21. And she told me she has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, and she went to the Colorado School of Mining. When she did at the school go on a field trip to Seattle to see the Seattle Tunnel Project and to see the TBM Big Bertha, that field trip helped define her future in tunneling. When I asked her about working in a majority male workforce, she told me she had to prove herself 2 times, where a male would only have to do it a single time. Once she proved herself twice, she was accepted by everybody. This was taken in front of the Broadway station, and it's an air dust remover from the Hollenbeck Hotel, constructed in 1884, and it was demolished in 1932. And I was fortunate to be there the day they discovered this. And I will add a link about the history of the hotel. And I think this was only about 10 or 15 feet underground that they discovered this. This is a picture of what the station almost looks like today. This was just taken about a month ago or so, maybe 2 months. And I'm looking from the LA Times parking lot, and the workers are installing the glass panels on the entrance to the station. And this is more of looking towards the south. And here it looks a little bit more towards the north. And when these stations are completed, there are so many interesting places to go find and look for. You know, this is right near the Grand Central Market, the Bradbury building. In my photography classes I took with Ray McSabney, we would go inside the Bradbury building and photograph. So it's gonna just open up some incredible places to go discover. My next project I was involved with was the 6th Street Viaduct. And this photo was taken on the closing of the 6th Street Bridge. They had a farewell party, and that was in October of 2015. And I just loved these girls in their candy corn dresses, and it was taken just a few days before Halloween. This is with the concrete road machine that pours the base of the street level of the 6th Street Bridge. And I have many photographs of the crews working on this. This is the cable tensioners above the LA River. And I haven't been back to the 6th Street Bridge since they had the grand opening, but I look forward to photographing it many more times. Here's a truck driver delivering liquid nitrogen to the construction site. Liquid nitrogen in the concrete truck. They use the nitrogen to cool the concrete down during the summer. Here's the carpenters in 2020. Iron workers. I really love this image. The iron worker has Boyle Heights on his hard hat, and definitely that's exactly where the 6th Street Bridge is in downtown LA in Boyle Heights. Here the worker was clearing out, I think the concrete had loosened up and came out of the arch, so they had to clean it and re-pour it because they had a small leak on the arch. Here's an iron worker. This was taken in 2021. On this photograph, I think he's an iron worker and he's with the Union of 416. And I think these were the cable leaders that they would use to put the cables from one side of the bridge to the other when they ran the cables through there. They would put the netting to protect down below the bridge and whenever they were working on it. And I just love this picture with the ladder. And this was taken in 2022. This is Kerry Gutierrez, a carpenter. This is an iron worker. There's plenty of all different masks that you see with the construction people. And I know when I was doing this project, Maya Epson with MTA Arts told me, Ken, I would photograph the hard hats of the workers if I was doing this project. And then I've heard that somebody wanted to do a project of the workers in the mask. And yes, definitely you could do that too. When these workers are doing a project, they really become like a family. And this one was taken in 2018. And you know, they'd work and then they'd take a little break. And that's when I would try to pose them for a photograph. Carpenters. This one was taken in 2022. Iron, oh no, wait, this is not an iron worker. This is a carpenter. Here's the iron workers. This was taken in July of 2021. Martha, carpenter. Carmen, carpenter. This job had the most women on it, this construction job. And this is Kerry Gutierrez. This is Ishmael and Ishmael Jr., and they were moving the supports of the steel after the tunnel, after the bridge had all the cables running through it. This is Sal and Ishmael. Sal was, I think, a superintendent on the project. You know, when they had the freeway shut down, here's one reason why. They were pumping concrete up on the arch that goes over the 101 freeway. And this was in May of 2021. Here's Chantel, 2019. Here's a worker standing on the beam, May of 2021. Arch form and rebar. It's just incredible the amount of rebar that went into this project and the tunneling projects too. Here's an iron worker removing support beams under the bridge, and this is when they also shut down the freeway. This was in 2021. Here's Robert and Emily. They're both engineers with Skanska, and Robert's was a specialty was the cable tensions. And I think he's retired now. And here the guys are tensioning the cables. They would use a computer readouts and get readings to tell exactly how much tension to put on the cables. Emily with the iron workers. And this is the iron workers, engineers, and the LA City Inspector, Art Gomez, September of 2021. This is where they're going to have the park, probably done in a couple of years, and it's the masonry workers underneath the bridge, 2022. Here the group photo of the iron workers installing rebar for the stairwell walkway to the 6th Street Bridge. Father and daughter carpenters, David and Monique. When I had my opening at 6th Street Bridge in July, it was so great to see some of the workers come and see their artwork on display, and just to see their smiles on their faces holding their photos. This is Caesar, an electrician, and he's installing the wiring for the LED lights, and that was probably a junction box there. And here's Caesar at the opening of the bridge and displaying his photo. And here he is with his family at the opening. And this is an electrician that has an interesting mask on that I photographed. And that was taken in 2022. My next project was the Purple Line Extension PL1, and some of these, as like the 6th Street Shades and the Purple Line and the regional, I was photographing at the same time. So the Purple Line is slated to open in 2024, and there was 3 stations they're doing: Wilshire La Brea, Wilshire Fairfax, and Wilshire La Cienega. Here's a map of the 3 stations. Here's a rendition, artist rendition of the station there at Wilshire and La Brea, Wilshire and Fairfax. Night scene rendition of Wilshire and La Cienega. And not far from La Cienega, you can go to Lowry's Prime Rib, get a nice meal right up the street from there. It's in walking distance. So here's another display of the TBMs that I will have the links to on the website. And here is the book about Wilshire Boulevard. The author is Kevin Roderick, and the research by J. Eric Linksweiler. And in this book, Wilshire Boulevard, Grand Concourse of Los Angeles, it's stated that the real estate entrepreneur J. Harvey McCarthy ran ads to entice homebuyers in the 1920s, promising that a subway would someday make for a 14-mile commute downtown. Here's Bert Dorr and Richard McLane, March of 2021. Here's the photograph of Richard, and now I'm going to turn this presentation over. I am honored to have Richard tell some history of the Purple Line tunneling.
First off, I want to just thank you for letting me be a little part of yours and Metro and LA history. What I wanted to do tonight is just present a shortened presentation that I'd done maybe a few weeks ago for the International Tunneling Association. Actually, I was both on West Side and Regional, and both projects have won International Tunneling Awards. So quite a major achievement for both projects. So thank you again. I really appreciate it. What I'd like to do tonight is just step through a little bit of the history of the tunneling along Section 1. As Ken had mentioned, it's been envisioned for about 100 years, and we'll step through sort of the challenges that we encountered building these tunnels. Here we are at the Fairfax station after crossing by the La Brea tar pits. I've got a couple of bits of information here. Obviously, the owner is currently the LAMTA. They came into being about 1993, but they have a couple predecessors, one being the SCRTD from 64 to 93, and then previously the LAMTA from 1951 to 64. Our client's designer is WSP Global. They acquired Parsons Brinkerhoff in 2014. Parsons Brinkerhoff has been working on the job since 1983. Actually saw Mr. Bill Hansmeyer, who's been on the job since that long, and a great guy. Before them, Converse Engineers, and then Kaiser before them. And I'll get a little bit into that as we step through. The contractor is Skanska Traylor Shea joint venture. You've seen that Traylor has built a number of jobs in Los Angeles, including the part of the Red Line, C311, the Gold Line, which you saw Tony Traylor was on. I was my first job with them, Regional Connector, and the West Side. So a little bit about the outline, some project history, our challenges, some solutions, Reach 2 and Reach 3, which we'll get into. Similar map that Ken had shown. Actually, the west side extension is a 10-mile extension from Wilshire Western all the way to Westwood VA Hospital. It's broken up into 3 sections, Section 1 in the east, Section 2, and then Section 3 in the west. Our section is Section 1 from Wilshire Western to actually just west of La Cienega. There's 2 small tail tracks, approximately 4 miles of twin bore tunneling, 23 cross passages, and 3 underground stations. Geotechnical challenges, which I'll talk about: methane, hydrogen sulfide gas, tar and oil, in a very dense urban setting. So there we are, Section 1. So a little bit about the history of the area. In 1905, a guy named Ralph Arnold, he's a USGS geologist, had been surveying the area, and the local native tribe had been mining surface deposit of tar. So he had noted in his bulletin, the field is locally known as the Salt Lake. That's from the first oil field operator producing company. And they have basically started the pumping oil from this area, sort of the genesis of the Beverly Hillbillies. I know that was a TV show, but it was actually based in a little bit of history. He had noted the nature of the flexure, which is the oil seeping to the surface, isn't known, but it could be due to some faulting in the area. So here we've got the Salt Lake oil field shown. And then the future Purple Line 1, and then the adjacent La Brea tar pits. They called it the Lagoon. We fast forward a little bit further. This is a view looking east along Wilshire Boulevard, going up and down the page. The arrow that you see is pointing to the intersection of Wilshire and San Vicente. So interestingly, here's the La Brea tar pits in the Salt Lake oil field. In 1896, the Sawtail line opened along San Vicente Boulevard. It actually went across a vineyard, and a sister line that chased it opened in 1906. These lines were built primarily by railroad companies looking to expand the urban environment. Their basic premise was to buy the land at cheap, build some railroads, and then flatten all the land. And that same quote that Ken had mentioned about J. Harvey McCarthy promising a subway would make its 14-minute commute downtown. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Here's his, he called it Carthay Circle, even though it's a triangle, kind of odd. And then we can see the future PLE1. So it kind of gives you some perspective about where we are in the city. And then downtown LA in the background. So fast forward a couple of years after World War II, LA had done its expansion with the freeways, but in 1961, a planned subway route was planned underneath Wilshire Boulevard by the LA MTA. Fast forward about 20 years, their plan was to build the Red Line, and this is sort of my throwback to one of the colors of the TBM. One of the reaches, contract A250, reach 5 crossed several faults. I think I highlight them here, and had known between La Brea and Fairfax to be extra hazardous or highly explosive, mainly due to the oil fields. You can see here sort of the future PLE1. 1985, a few years later, there was an explosion at the Ross Dress for Less. This is pretty well known. And then the United States Congress had banned any tunneling that was going to happen through this area. I put on a couple of banners here. So one of the interesting things is all the stuff that I'm showing here is 99% within the historical record. Anyone can find this stuff if they do a little bit of digging. Here, this graphic shows the future PLE1 alignment. The 3rd Street Fault, the Gilmore Drill Island. So this is where the oil fields were, instead of having a vast vertical network of oil wells, they basically drill them directionally from a small footprint. So the money for Purple Line, or actually the Red Line at that time, was put on hold. Starting from that time through the mid-90s, Metro tried to go around the oil field. 1995, they found some alternative routes. However, also found 100% methane and very deadly hydrogen sulfide gas. So Ken had showed a couple of pictures of the digger, we would call it digger shield type TBM, and really not possible with that technology. So it went on hold for another 10 years. So in 2005, Metro looked back at the Wilshire alignment. There had been some new technology developments within TBMs, sort of the video that Ken had shown in EPB TBM and slurry TBMs, but also Traylor Brothers successful tunneling in East Los Angeles with the Gold Line extension through the Boyle Heights oil field with no issues. And Metro was able to convince Congress that with these new technologies, the tunneling through the area would be safe. And so they looked back at Wilshire. Some reference labels there. So the ban on funding is repealed. Yay, everyone gets the money. So what were the specific challenges? Well, just because we have new TBMs doesn't mean the methane and the hydrogen sulfide goes away. Metro had measured methane at 100% along the alignment near the tar pits, noting it's explosive between 1% and 5% by volume with air. And methane, just for those that don't know, it's the same gas that you use on a gas stove. It just has no smell. It's odorless, colorless. You can't see it. Hydrogen sulfide is the gas that smells like rotten eggs. And it's deadly at roughly about 500 ppm. So still a dangerous alignment. The presence of the tar from the oil fields down below, coming up through the ground formations would present a problem. And then, as most of these soft ground tunnels were below the water table, so the TBMs are literally like submarines. So STS, the joint venture, we needed to make a selection on the type of TBM, and through calculations, we selected an EPB. So just a couple of notes there. So what happened? Reach 1, we launched from La Brea towards Western in October of 2018. It was basically uneventful. I think our best day on that reach was about 155 feet in 20 hours. So pretty good productions. I think we averaged somewhere in 75, 80 foot range. We took the machines apart, kind of like what Ken showed for the regional connector, put them back together, and then launched for Reach 2 in October of 2019. And then January of 20, we hit some gas with concentrations higher than what Cal OSHA would say, which is the limit, and it ended up in 263 evacuations. Fortunately, with the technology that we have, there were no ignitions and no safety concerns. Here's our Reach 2 alignment, La Brea tar pits. Kind of some interesting side notes here. A guy in 2017, Eteope, he published a paper. He was measuring gas from the La Brea tar pits, and he remapped the 6th Street Fault. And kind of an interesting thing, just more coincidental. When we connect the first gas hits on the north machine and the south machine, they line up pretty close. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But the good news is we made it to the Fairfax station in May of 2020, albeit, as I mentioned, covered in tar. But the impossible reach, it was completed after 60 years. So we're going back to 1961. And we proved that tunneling through an oil field is possible and done safely. But our work isn't done. That was only one of 3 challenges. As I mentioned, we were tunneling through an oil field. In Reach 3, the next reach from Fairfax to La Cienega, there were 4 oil wells that were identified within the tunnel alignment. That's represented by these 4 green circles that you see here. The centers of the circles are where the California Conservation thinks those oil wells are, but they could be within 200-foot radius of those points. So you can see we wouldn't want to run into a oil well. I don't know if you could see my cursor or not. The oil well 03715-144, the second one from the right, that's called Getty 49 after the company that drilled it. And they drilled it in 1907 and final abandonment in 1913. So it took 6 years to cap. Reading the oil well record, it seemed to be not an easy task. Let's see, I think I've got a couple other things on here. So here's our Reach 3. In 2009, Metro drilled M13. That was a gas observation well, and they measured 100% methane and 6,500 ppm H2S. So that's one of the thoughts was maybe that oil well was leaking. So we started to investigate further. I hired a subcontractor, Golder, and they designed and built for us monitoring wells and soil vapor extraction wells, and put a thermal oxidizer on the surface. So there's M13, sort of the location we think Getty 49 is. And I'll get to a little bit later. We actually think we found it, so we steered the TBMs around this oil well. But during the excavation, we extracted 4 million cubic feet of gas while simultaneously tunneling through with a tunnel boring machine. This is a picture of the thermal oxidizing unit. Basically, these 21 vapor extraction wells suck the gas out of the ground and then pipe to this, effectively a burner, that then burn the methane. So once we're through there, still work not done. Here's our Reach 3, M13, couple reminders. We found an anomaly while searching for these wells. We did some directional drilling from the surface down to the tunnel depth, and we located, we think, that oil well Getty 49. As I mentioned, we steered around it. However, we've located 2 more anomalies, basically in the center of Wilshire San Vicente. So we're looking for these 2 oil wells on the left, directionally drill down to the tunnel depth, pull a magnetometer, and the magnetometer finds, geologists call it an anomaly. So something made of steel at tunnel depth, which we can not generally drill through. Here's our east anomaly. Here's our west anomalies. So zooming in, we could see these west anomalies, basically geolocate them where the TBM is. Let's see. And going back to that picture in 1922, you go, what the heck could be in that intersection, right? So here we have the La Brea tar pits, the Sawtell line, which was in 1898, the future PLE1, but also a ravine. So how does a railroad get across a ravine? Maybe it's a rail bridge, or maybe it's an oil derrick. We don't know. Here's that same intersection. A few years later, about 8 years later, you could see the expansion of Los Angeles, which is just an incredible explosion at that time. And we can see also sort of the northeast quadrant, no ravine. So what could it be? So here we have all these old pictures. Trying to remember the source. I think it was the water and power source, but here's Fairfax. Here's the Salt Lake oil field. Here's the future PLE1. And then this is La Cienega Boulevard and an oil derrick right in the middle of the road. So many questions. Obviously, we don't want to run an oil well. So doing some digging in the county website, we found the La Jolla storm drain. So La Jolla storm drain, I didn't highlight it here, but it was built in 1924. So about that same time, between 1922 and 1930. And on one of the drawings, we can see there was an existing railway bridge. Well, maybe there's a bridge there. I don't know. Regardless of what it is, we have to solve the problem. And this is one of the busiest intersections in Los Angeles. Albeit it was during COVID, Metro asked, what's the easiest solution? And we had proposed shutting the entire street down or the intersection, and that was shut down right quick. So we came up with a plan to install chemical grout blocks around the anomalies and then remove them from in front of the TBM 1 foot at a time to quote unquote clear the path. So there's the west anomaly, chemical grout blocks. I've got them highlighted here. And lo and behold, we found an anomaly in the BR tunnel, about the 1 o'clock position, about 2 foot in the tunnel, a steel pile that would have done significant damage to the TBM. Kind of hard to see there, but I tried to outline it as best I could. So then we went back to the other machine and found also a steel beam at the 1 o'clock position, about 4 foot into the tunnel alignment. Oops, so you can see the outline there. That flashlight kind of gives it a little bit of scale. But we cleared the path, and then both TBMs made it into La Cienega, the first subway tunnels in Beverly Hills history. And after 100 years in the making, and an International Tunnel Association project of the year 2022. Thank you for listening. Ken, back to you, I guess.
All right. All right. I'm going to move along, and so we can get to the questions. And this is at Wilshire and La Cienega. No, excuse me, Wilshire and La Brea. And this is where they're launching the TBM, and that is Bert Dorr pointing to the miner of some adjustments that are being made, and the TBM is heading east. And this was in 2018. This is Jimmy, a miner at the bottom landing. He had just finished working on the conveyor belt that takes the dirt underground to the top side at La Brea. And they were just, I guess the belt had shifted off the conveyor, off the roller. Here's where the tunnel segments are lowered down at La Brea. And the Dodgers were, I think, during the winning the World Series, and they had painted on the crane hoist the LA logo. Here's installing tunnel segments inside the TBM 2019. Here's a group photo of the miners inside the TBM 2019. Here's a surveyor in the tunnel 2021. Sunlight filters in the future station at La Brea. As the TBM advances, workers add air ducts, rail tracks, and utilities such as water, power, and airlines. This was taken in 2020. A miner next to the pump as they pour the concrete tunnel floor. The reflection of an air duct inside the tunnel below Wilshire Blvd, 2021. Here you can see the walkway's been poured to the right there. La Cienega scaffolding with a glow. Whenever I see something that looks interesting and doesn't have to be a worker, I will photograph it. This is the La Cienega mezzanine level, July of 2022. I saw this picture when I was down at the bottom landing of a miner looking at the two tunnels, and this is heading west. They had to go another 600-800 feet inside the tunnel, and that's where Traylor's brother's contract ended. Here's the La Cienega Station Carpenters Group photo, August of 2022. La Cienega Tunnel cross path. They're about 15 feet apart from one tunnel to the next. And I think it's either 600 or 800 feet that they have to have these cross paths in case of an emergency inside the tunnel. This is looking at the very end of the cutting head that the mechanics are taking out piece by piece so that the TBM that's coming from Century City will be able to connect the the tunnels together. And this was taken in 2022, and the workers right now are taking it apart. And here are two of the mechanics, Frank and Derek, July of 2022. We are now going to PLE2, which you'll see kind of less photos than the previous now because I've kind of only been down there about, I don't know, 6, 7 times. Here's a map of the stations for PL2. Here is the rendering of the Wilshire Rodeo Station. Here is the rendition of the Century City Constellation Station. Miner with flashlight pointing at TBM at the Rodeo Station. This is after it broke through at the Rodeo Station, the TBM. Portrait of a welder, Rodeo Station, February 2022. This is at the Rodeo Station, the TBM entering the station. That was in February of 22. I could do a story on all the gloves that I find sprawled out on the construction site, and I could do a portfolio or an exhibit just on the gloves that I find at the construction areas. This is at Century City, the bottom landing where they crane in the segment pieces. This was just at the Century City bottom landing, the east end of the station. And these saw blades, they were about 12, 14 feet in diameter. And I saw the lighting hitting the ends of them, and that's why I made this exposure. This is the Century City station. The workers are supporting the utilities underground as they keep digging farther down to the station level. And I think it was about 90 feet down below ground. They'll reach the bottom. And I think they're close to that now. This was taken in 2021. Here's all the utilities that they do hit underground and why it may take long to get these projects finished. But as you can see, there's lots of utilities underground is where they're building the stations at. And here's a portrait of I think he's a construction supervisor. And looking at the TBM at the Rodeo Station, February of 22. And here they are lowering the tunnel segments from the Century City station area. And this is looking inside the TBM at the Rodeo Station, February in 2022. So now we move on to the Purple Line Extension, PL3. And those are the two stations, Westwood and Westwood VA, UCLA and the VA hospital stations. They all want to get this work done before the Olympics starts. This is the station here, Wilshire Westwood. And this is the Wilshire VA station. I remember when my friend Ray was at the VA hospital, where the station entrance is now is where I used to park when I went to visit him. So here's the concrete arch form inside the TBM. The Tudor Perini project here, they are not, they don't use rails. They're Lokis, just go in freewheeling. They have a driver at each end, and the one driver would just switch to the other side when he's going back out. Here's the conveyor belt at the bottom landing at just on the west side of the VA hospital. This is Miner Eblo in November of 2021 inside the TBM. Two workers at the bottom landing, November 2021. I just came across in all my years photographing to Brittany. She's the first crane operator of a woman that I photographed as being a crane operator. This was just taken in January of 23. This is a miner, Dylan Murphy, at the BLTB, and he's the TBM operator. Here is changing, the miner's changing his rubber boots in the tunnel entrance. And this photo was just taken in December of 22, the group photo of miners inside the TBM. I wish to tell you about the book that I had with the MTA. I worked with Allison Porterfield, Senior Art Program Specialist, and she told me that Deep Connections, the exhibition, which was at Union Station, and the exhibition book won a Grand Prize Award with the American Public Transportation Association. And this is the highest level of this award, a notable achievement in transportation, and they sent the announcement directly to the MTA CEO. I sent, in December of 21, I mailed Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, my Deep Connections exhibition catalog. And in January of 2022, I received this wonderful thank you letter from him. I just wanted to share real quick an exhibit that's going on in Los Angeles, and it's at the California Science Center in Exposition Park. And the exhibit is by photographer Sebastio Salgado. He also photographed miners, and it's on exhibit until February 20th, 2023. You can take the Metro Express line to the Expo Park USC station and get right off there and walk across the street to the Science Museum. And not only when you're there to see the exhibit, you can see the Space Shuttle Endeavour. And I want to say thank you to all the workers involved with building the Los Angeles's future transportation needs. And that's it. And I hope you enjoyed it. And now we'll try to answer a few of your questions. Well, I think from my photography classes, they would always tell you to do a project close to your home. And when I did photograph the Pasadena Rose Bowl flea market, I always wanted to talk with the vendors first before I put a camera to their face. And I think even when I go down in the construction projects, I try to get a conversation with the workers and before I do take their portraits. And even with the motorcycle riders, you definitely wanted to talk to them, and they would say, oh, just take a picture of my motorcycle. And I would say, no, I don't want to take a picture of the bike. It's the person that's behind the bike or next to the bike that I want to photograph. And I think with that experience, I don't know exactly every time I go down in the tunnels of what I'll photograph, but the light is constantly changing. As the years go on, the technology is changing. And when I did take the workshops with Ray, Bruce, and John, I thought maybe I did want to go be a landscape photographer, but I knew that wasn't possible because I was working as an electrician at ABC Studios. So now that I'm retired, I do have the opportunity, but I just love going in the tunnels. And I have this pass that lets me, because I am safety oriented and I know the dangers of construction. So thank you. And I hope I answered your question. I am half German and half Armenian, and on my German side, my mother's maiden name was Freundlich, and a Freundlich in English means friendly. So I always try to be a friend to whoever I photograph, whoever I meet. And I'll tell you, on this project of working with the MTA, I have met such incredible, nice people that I really enjoy working with not only the MTA, but also the different construction companies that I'm involved with, the contractors. And I learned photography through the masters. I love going to the museums and seeing the photography exhibits, and it's an inspiration to my artwork to see theirs.
We imagine that crews are tunneling 24 hours per day. Is that correct, Richard? It's 24/7?
It's not 24, it can be 24/7. That's used on occasion. A typical shift is 2 10-hour shifts. But when we get to critical crossings of critical, say, utilities, we do go 24/7, but it can be very challenging. No one likes to work 7 days a week. So we try to keep that to a minimum.
So then William is asking you, Ken, what shifts were your favorite to photograph? Was there a difference?
Well, I was photographing some of the swing shifts when I was working on the Hollywood Red Line, but now mostly I do go down during the day. I do have to get my safety equipment, and usually the tunnel offices are only open during the day to get the safety equipment. So I usually now just photograph during the day, and I know I'm missing out a lot of some night photography, but most of the time now is during the day that I photograph. And I see there's a question about shooting film or digital. 98% is film. I will sometimes, if the conditions are safe, to bring a digital camera down in the tunnels. I will take a digital camera, and usually with those images, I pass them on to the MTA and they can use them. But I really enjoy just plainly working with one camera. It's a Hasselblad 2 1/4 by 2 1/4. I usually always take a tripod, and I use Ilford and Tri-X film, and I print on Ilford multi-grade paper.
Roberto, would love to see some more of your Southwest photos. I don't know if you have some of those on your website, maybe.
I think there is. I think there is some of those. I think.
Yeah.
I haven't looked. I know my website needs to be updated. I haven't done it for about 2 years. It says, if you would build a metro line anywhere in LA, where would you put it? Well, the first thing I would do is I extend the North Hollywood line all the way to the Burbank Airport. Then I would extend the Orange Line, the busway, as far west to the San Fernando Valley to Woodland Hills. Somehow have a line that goes from Woodland Hills to Agoura Hills. I haven't really figured that out yet, because I know they're building that bridge for the Animal Crossing, but definitely. And I know you can log on to the MTA website and learn about the transit corridor over the Sepulveda Pass. They're having meetings about that. And I know my next door neighbor went to the onto the 405, got off at Wilshire to go to a doctor's office, and she left at about, I don't know, it was 7 in the morning. It took her close to 2 hours to drive there. So we definitely need something to go over that 405 freeway, or underneath the 405 freeway.
Stephanie is asking where the Center City Station is. Is that Avenue of America?
Yeah, and Constellation, I guess. Yeah. I know I went to the Annenberg Space for Photography that is right across from where they're building the subway station. And I just sent the Annenberg one of Ray's books, and also my Deep Connections. And I told them, please, I regret the closing of the Annenberg Space for Photography. It was such a beautiful place to visit, a photography gallery, and they had beautiful lectures there too also.
So this is a pretty complex question. From within the tunnel, I don't know if you saw, and Ken, he pointed out multiple times, the double gasket seal within the tunnel. So that basically prevents the gas and nitrogen sulfide from coming within. The selection of how many TBMs is one of really schedule and cost. For the regional connector that we constructed, we used a single tunnel boring machine. And actually, interestingly, that machine we used along with its sister for the Gold Line. So 2 new TBMs for the Gold Line extension in 2005-06. And then we rebuilt those 2 machines, took them to Seattle, built the university link from Union Station to University of Washington. And then for Regional Connector, we built one of them again for that job. For the West Side Tunnel, we had 2 TBMs. You can see in the background the red and the purple. Hope you link the colors. We talked a little bit earlier before the presentation where those Cutterhead colors came from, but it really depends on the project. I know that Section 2 and Section 3 both have 2 TBMs to construct their tunnels. The specific ones for Regional Connector West Side 1, 2, 3 are made in Germany by a company called Herrenknecht. They are pretty much the Mercedes of tunneling machines, best in the world, one might say. There's a company here in the US that still makes tunneling machines called Robbins. And then a couple of companies in Japan that manufacture them.
Are the TBMs able to turn, or are they limited to straight tunneling only?
Great question. So the TBMs themselves actually turn quite tight turns. So Regional Connector had one of the tightest turns into Hope Station out of Broadway, 583 foot radius. So the TBMs do turn, and then the precast segments behind the machine are also tapered. And so depending on how those rings are rotated within the tunnel, follows the TBM and the alignment.
Can you describe the cutting features on the TBM cutting head?
Let's see here. So if you can see behind me, the purple structure or the red structure, that's the base structure of the TBM. And then the tools are painted in black. So they're rolling disc cutters. Those are 17-inch rolling disc cutters, and they work sort of like cutting glass. You don't really cut glass, you score it, and then you fracture. These disc cutters work the same way. They're impregnated with tungsten carbide and hard facing. And then the other tools that you can see, bucket lips that are on the periphery, and then scrapers that collect the soil, the muck we call it. And then the openings within the cutter head allow that muck to pass through and then be ingested by the TBM.
How do you navigate underground?
That's a good question. So obviously GPS doesn't work. So we use traditional theodolite lasers, survey lasers, and basically build a network of targets and prisms underground to track the TBM's position, where it's gone and where it's going.
Where does all the dirt go?
On these particular projects, they go to the dump. Typically, the muck is used as ground cover. So everyone throws their trash away, goes to the dump, and then the dump has a requirement to cover it all up. So they use our muck to do that on a daily basis.
Richard, I have a question for you. When you're tracking the tunnel positions, do you also track it ahead of the TBM, or is it just tracking it from behind the TBM?
Well, the TB just from behind, there's a laser it depends on the line of sight because it's a straight line. There's a target unit on the front of the TBM that basically captures that laser and then determines the pitch and yaw of the TBM. And the laser also can shoot a distance to how far it is. So the laser knows its position, northing, easting elevation in space, and then it hits the target. And then based on the azimuth and angle of the laser, can calculate the TBM position.
How did you know that those buried steel beams were there?
Right, so that was the big question mark. We didn't know that they were steel beams. We knew that there was steel there. So the question was, is it a steel oil well casing? Is it a foundation, some sort of steel foundation for a bridge? We knew that through a historical investigation that there was a railroad that crossed there. You find out, okay, there's a railroad bridge. Someone had postulated, well, maybe it's a wooden bridge, and well, a magnetometer doesn't pick up wood, so it has to be made of steel. We just didn't know what it was. And
so you knew in advance that there was something there, but you didn't know what it was. So it wasn't a surprise while doing
No,
the drilling?
well,
No, right.
Let's say this, we didn't know there was something there when we bid the job. Only through the course of construction did we discover there was some anomaly that's there, that's in front of the TBM, and it's poking along. Eventually it will get to the anomaly before, if we don't do anything. So that's where we work with Metro to formulate a plan. How do we mitigate this potential disaster? And, you know, in the background in the tunneling world, you have the SR-99 project up in Seattle, where the TBM was down for 2 years with various issues. So this could have just been a complete bomb on the entire West Side project. And so I think our coordinated effort really saved the day, really.
Oh, and then we have 3 people here that are really curious about how the TBMs are powered.
Okay, great question. So the TBMs are powered through electricity. So we build a substation on the job site. So power from DWP comes in at 34,000 volts, 34.5 kV. We'll step that down to 13,000 volts, transmit that to the tunneling machine through effectively a large extension cord. And then on the TBM, we'll step down the power again to 480 volts to power roughly 7 400 horsepower motors. Those electric motors then drive hydraulics that turn the cutter head. 3 of those motors are for cutter head, three for screw conveyors, and 1 for auxiliary. But basically electric over hydraulic.
And we're gonna move over to you now. John is wondering, how many photos have you taken in your 30 years documenting these projects, approximately?
Well, my one roll of film has 12 exposures on it. And when I go photographing, I'll take 5 rolls of film with me usually, and that's my average. And I usually do average every other week of photographing a project. So it's incredible the amount of images I do have. And there's a lot of images that I need to go back and work in my dark room. And now my next project is, I'd really like to do a book on the 6th Street Bridge. I would like to do a book on the Red Line. I would like to do a book on the regional connector, but it's just the cost, and I might just do a print on demand book. It's all these different ideas that I have and putting it together. Or I guess I could just put it in one book and have the sections of the 6th Street Bridge, the regional, and the Red Line. But I have an incredible amount of negatives.
So Richard, I think this is a follow-up. We might have partly covered this. How was the steel pilings discovered removed? Obviously, you can't back the TBMs up to go around.
Okay, that's a great question. So the first anomaly that I discussed at Crescent Heights, that one we were able to steer around. The 2 that we had to remove, we removed from within the excavation chamber. So effectively grout the ground around the anomaly to stabilize that soil. We're below the water table. Then mine by hand, 1 foot at a time, to clear in front of the cutter head by hand, to basically clear the ground to find the anomaly. And then once we found the anomaly, I called the Metro project manager, Jim Cohen. I said, Jim, do you want the good news or the good news? He said, give me both. I said, the good news is we found something, so this all wasn't for nothing. And the other good news is we can just cut it out with a oxyacetylene torch. So it literally took 20 minutes to actually cut out.
How many members on the work crew? What type of experience to get on the crew? And finally, what and how many hours a day was the work conducted? And I'm going to add something to that, because when we had a little test run, you were talking when you were hiring engineers and people working on these projects that they're really they're part of history. They're building something that is probably going to last for hundreds of years, maybe at least 100 years. And so if you could expand a little bit on that and Mark's questions.
Sure. So I'll start with Mark's questions because they're probably the easiest first. So on the tunneling machine, there's typically a TBM operator, what we call a shift engineer, a shifter. He's sort of like the foreman on the TBM. He runs the show on the machine, a mechanic, an electrician, and about 6 miners. And the miners are actually local 300, great guys. It's a special class of laborer. And that's pretty much what we have on the TBM. And then back at the shaft, or where we're loading the segments, there'd be a crane operator, what we'd call an oiler. An oiler is sort of the crane operator assistant. What we'd call a top man. He's the one preparing or rigging segments or utilities, and then a bottom man. And then in between those two, we have operators that'll load or move the locomotives from the shaft to the TBM heading. And then various other folks that are working at the batch plant or a compressor plant. And then on top of that, a set of engineers every shift that are working together. Then another level of superintendents and supervision. So on a single TBM, there's probably 50 people per shift. To answer the bigger question, I do a lot of recruiting for engineering jobs. And one of my pitches is that we're building civilization, that we're actually building something that is going to last 100 years or 150 years. And it's something that, I think, Ken, you capture quite well with your photography, generations of people that, that build the work, their fathers and their sons and their daughters in the next in line. So I think that's really something that everybody that's a part of these projects can be proud of.
So Ken, a couple of questions for you. You had mentioned the risk of using a digital camera underground. What can you expand on that? And what digital camera are you using?
On the PL2 right now, you cannot even bring your keys if they have a battery in it down there. So I only bring my black and white film camera that has no batteries to it. A light meter I cannot take down there. And it's just when it's considered a gassy tunnel that I am not allowed anything with a battery. So a lot of my exposures underground in the gassy conditions where I have no light meter is just through experience of photographing so long under tunnels that has helped me with the exposures.
And maybe I can expand just a little bit on what Ken is talking about, the gassy environment. Here in California, after the Selmar Tunnel explosion in 1971, Cal OSHA defined a mining and tunneling unit, a very skilled set of engineers that have experience in tunneling and mining, that put together a set of rules that we basically have to follow, regulations. And they can define a tunnel or an excavation as non-gassy, potentially gassy, or extra hazardous. That's not to say that our miners work in a gassy environment. As I mentioned, if we hit 20% of the lower explosive limit, everything shuts down, all the electronics on the TBM, and everyone has to evacuate. So to prevent any fire or explosion, any electronics that aren't permitted are basically prohibited. You can't bring it down. You couldn't bring down an iPhone. You can't bring down an iPad or a watch with a battery. It's just not permitted. So we have some very strict safety regulations to prevent, another catastrophe like Selmar Tunnel explosion or the Ross Dress for Less.
So related to this, Ryan is asking you, Richard, have you ever seen the movie Volcano? I think that came out like 20 years ago when the whole Miracle Mile.
Yeah, it's a movie.
Yeah, right.
I will say there was a kind of an interesting side note when we were tunneling through Reach 2. Some flyers came out for a new TV show called La Brea that they were going to be filming along Wilshire, and there was going to be a huge sinkhole. And I thought, it's just not a good idea to do that while we're in that same spot. And then I think it came out maybe a year later.
One more for you, Rich, and then we'll go back to Ken. You might have mentioned this already, but how far below the surface are the tunnels? Also mentioned the water table that has the drought had any effect or any effect on the tunneling process there?
Okay, so we're typically 60 to 120 feet below the ground surface. The regional water table does go up and down, but not really tied to any drought or any effect like that. So it's really the water table.
No, so Ken, Jason clarified his question a little bit here, I think. Do using photography to document infrastructure tell us something about photography as well as infrastructure?
I know when I first started this project, I was going, well, what am I going to photograph? And am I going to have an escort every time I photograph? So on the red line, after the years or after the 6 months, I didn't need somebody following me all the time. But now with the regulations, usually I do go with an escort. But I figured, am I going to be documenting the construction, or am I going to be making my fine art photographs that just, could include the portraits and scenes where I'm showing the lighting and how it filters in. And I didn't want to be, the MTA has photographers that are documenting the construction. And even nowadays with the PL2 and 3, and probably even with the PL1, they have their supervisors with their iPads or computers that are gas safe. They're sealed, and they are documenting the project. So I am there for myself to make fine art photographs and to really show the human emotions, the human hands that are building this project. I mean, when you see the Eiffel Tower, or you see a bridge, the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, or the Boulder Dam, there's a human project behind that, not just concrete. So I hope I answered your question.
Jump in on that if I can. This is Mike Holland. In the city archives, we have photographs among that Public Works documented, including building the bridges. And if you look at a set of photographs of the 6th Street Bridge, the original 6th Street Bridge being built, you really learn a lot about the level of technology that was, or in some cases wasn't there in the 1930s when it was being built. You get an interesting perspective on the sheer amount of human labor that was involved in a project like that. I mean, they were even using mule teams to do a lot of moving of materials and so forth. And you notice that there isn't a single hard hat among anyone working on the project. There are vests, ties, soft coats, soft hats, and because of the assignment of labor, you really notice who's in charge on a job site, and to a certain extent what color they are. And it is such a throwback compared to what is available today and what we're using today. And there's certainly room to argument that we're doing so much better work now because we have better tools, better people, and we've got a better understanding of how all those elements work, both scientific and the human element. But of course, that just opens up the door for all sorts of interesting debate. I just wanted to throw that in there as well. And these were guys that were documenting what they saw, but occasionally you see someone was trying to do an artistic photograph.
Okay, so last question from Richard to Richard, and this is related to the gas environment. What type of lighting is safe down there?
That's a good question. So lighting, along with all the other permissible electrical equipment, has been basically tested by a company like UL. You go in your kitchen, you'll see the fine print underneath some piece of electronics that it's been tested. And in this case, the lighting has been tested by a company like UL or ETL, Intertech, for safe use in explosive environment. It's called Class 1 Division 2. And so every piece of equipment needs to be permissible, not just by UL, but also then approved by Cal OSHA. So that's a very stringent regulation. But typically the lights that we're using right now are LED. Used to be metal halide and high pressure sodium, but today we're using LED lights in the tunnel.
All right. Well, thank you so much, both of you. We really appreciate it. And thanks for everyone that attended, for all the good questions, all the comments in the chat. If you're interested, again, in the Historical Society and what we do, we have all our webinars recorded from the past. You can go to our website here and get more information. And consider joining us. For all of those of you that are already members, we thank you. If you go to metro.net/projects, you will find information on all of Metro's projects. They are in alphabetical order. So if we scroll down here, I don't mean make you seasick here, but here are the purple extension. Section 1, Section 2, Section 3. Section 1 was the one that Richard was covering. Then you can click on it. You have some renderings, information on what's going on. There are, community events. So there is a lot of information here if you're interested in what's going on. So it is, again, metro.net/projects. So with that said, thank you again, Richard, and thank you, Ken. Really appreciate your time, both great presentations.